we'll go from there. Oh, who's that?
That was me. I just started the recording.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome everyone to our November 4th Legislative Committee for the Colorado Forest Health Council meeting. We haven't met since in a month. This is since our October meeting on October 7th. And since we have not a quorum, we'll skip the minutes and move on to the third agenda item, discussion of the full council meeting and other the other legislation next session to monitor, and then talk about the November 1st budget release, which was exciting news, and saw that. And so I will, I'll just kind of do the first part if that's right, Angela, and then have you talk about the budget. So I just thought we'd talk about, it seemed really that full Colorado, our full Colorado Forest Health Council meeting, sorry, seemed like most people met our amendments, sorry, with full acceptance and not a lot of discussion. Does anyone have anything to say about that? I'm going to grab my coffee. Hold on.
I can just provide a quick update that we shared the approved amendments with the legislative director for DNR, Alice Horgan. And so the idea is that she will pass those on to legislators. And then as the bills move through this session, we can continue to monitor them and track, and it sounds like the sponsors are very amenable to incorporating those amendments. So I think we just track as they go.
Did you hear any feedback from Representative Cutter after the meeting?
I don't know if we did after the meeting, but she has said multiple times, and maybe it was even in that meeting, that she is on board. I think the next piece of the puzzle for her bill is to talk to is it Senator Huckes Lewis and make sure that she's on board because she's sort of the other key piece here.
I have an opportunity to run into her when she was visiting Larimer County with some family, so I expressed our support. Or my support of how for her service and her sponsoring the bill. So she seemed excited about that. Is that Mr. Morgan? Good morning, Mr. Morgan. Does that give us a quorum now?
I think so. I'm curious about Carolyn sitting in for Director McCombs. Like, will that count towards quorum? I know some positions, I think for this one it does. Okay, great. So yes,
an agency.
Can she vote in this subcommittee, or does it count towards quorum?
She can technically vote. Each agency member
that's right.
designate a staff member
cool
for them.
Awesome. I forgot about that. Thank you. So would everyone mind if we move back to the minutes real quick? Anybody have any questions or concerns about the minutes as presented? Great. I welcome a motion to approve the minutes from October 7th.
I so moved.
I'll move to second.
Mr. Morgan moved and Hillary second. Commissioner Cooper seconded. So sorry. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Great. Thank you all. We'll approve those minutes and move on. So back to our discussion for agenda item number 3. Any other insights or any other bills that we should have on the horizon or think about or be talking about in this committee? Angela, do you think?
I'll open the floor after this because to be honest, I haven't heard many rumors about forest related bills outside of the Wildfire Matters bills, except for, and maybe Diana or Carolyn can provide some more color here, but I think that Rep. Meg Froelich is still quite interested in not only, support for the nursery, which will make it through sort of as a interim bill, but when they first developed last year's nursery bill that put $5 million towards the nursery retrofits, she initially tied that together with this sort of Million Trees campaign concept, where she, I think, was really looking for the state to commit to planting a certain number of trees. And I think she's now still really excited about that, but more in an urban context. So Carolyn, I don't know if you have more perspective on that and what she's thinking.
Yeah, so she's pulled together a couple meetings on this concept with partners, and it's basically she wants to do her Million Tree bill that she wanted to do last year, but she wants to have more of a focus on urban and community forestry and working with partners in and around communities. So that's something that we're working on with her that I believe she wants to run in her first 5 bills. I don't have a lot more details than that because they're just like really preliminary conversations. But I was going to ask, so at the Forest Health Council meeting, we didn't cover all the 5 bills that were forwarded. And the one in particular we didn't cover was the one forwarded by Will for a rerun of the bill that didn't pass last year for internships and tax incentives. Is there a reason we didn't talk about that one?
I think we did talk about it a little bit because we discussed moving the paid internships out of that bill into the Representative Cutter's bill. So we did talk about it, I guess a part of it, about getting those, combining those two. And that was our recommendation. And I think that was accepted as we voted to approve that, those amendments and changes. Mr. Morgan.
So will that bill just basically be the tax incentives then?
If they accept our amendments and go forward, I don't know what they have. As far as I know, they haven't. I don't know if I haven't talked to that or heard from about that sponsor changing those amendments. But I think Representative Cover said she was open to adding that. I thought, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think she was open to that. Mr. Morgan, you had your hand raised.
That was all you got handled there was the fact that the internship bill was moved into the recruitment bill, and everybody voted on that, and then the tax incentive I think was going to be a standalone deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions about that? Okay. And that's great to hear about Representative Froelic's bill. I wonder how we can, how that will impact the forest health since it's an urban focus, but maybe she can talk about what my CIO calls the urban fringe, those kind of things before the foothills and the urban centers. That would be interesting. Well, Mr. Morgan, go ahead.
One thing about that if you trend, I'm very involved with a lot of water districts, and one of the problems we have in this state right now is water availability, and a lot of that comes from excessive plantings in what were traditionally tall grass prairie environments in a lot of these urban areas where we're planting trees and we're creating a huge water demand, and that dewaters a lot of agricultural property, and it also just earmarks water that we don't have. There's a huge shift right now from urban water from agricultural water to urban water, and then a shortage of water altogether. So I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but we need to be real careful what kind of agricultural landscaping we have in that urban environment to go forward here in Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I actually attended a community meeting with a lot of business, the Community Foundation, with their recommendations. The Stevenson Fellows paper. I don't know if anyone saw that. That was one thing they talked about, being careful with the agricultural sector. So that's interesting you bring that up. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Hillary, I didn't see your hand up. I apologize. Commissioner Cooper.
That's okay. I don't see my hand up either. I'm not very good at navigating Teams. I wonder if we could get a little more information on that bill, and then maybe as a placeholder for one of our other committees, if we could have that discussion, because there's a lot of benefits to planting trees as well. They may need short-term water, but there are proven scientific benefits for planting trees, maybe not out in the middle of the field. Well, actually, even in the middle of the field potentially, but along waterways. So there's certainly two sides to that, and all sorts of stuff in between. So maybe it'd be interesting to find out more about that bill, if we could, from Rep. Froelich, and then also plant that as a seed, if you will, for our 2023 conversations to bring some folks in to help us understand the dynamics of tree planting.
Well,
Yeah, when I get more information on that bill, I will definitely get it to this committee, and we'll have the Forest Health Council involved. I don't think that Rep. Froelich has a very good idea of what she wants to do yet. So once she does, I'll definitely circle back around with everybody.
Christy, you have your hand up.
Thank you. And my question would be also, who is planting these million trees? So I just did quick math, and if there are 300 communities that do this, that's 3,300 trees per community. And I'm just wondering, is it going to be more volunteer based, or are there going to be costs involved? That would be my question about this bill.
That's a good question. I was just going to bring up, I've been involved, or trying to get more involved with the Coalition for the Poudre Watershed, along with other agencies, the City of Greeley and Poudre Valley REA, been planting trees up in the burn scar. And, it's like maybe 400 trees a day with volunteers. And so, and I know those agencies are funding, raising and contributing to that effort. And it's interesting you bring that up, because that's one thing. If we do host the Forest Health Council in April here, Director Combs and I were talking about maybe give an opportunity for our Forest Health Council to participate in maybe one of the burn scar tree plantings. So I don't know what you all think about that idea.
I think it's a great idea.
Awesome. Mr. Morgan.
Kind of having been involved with it some in the past, there's tree planting and then there's tree planting. And if you're planting in a forestry environment and you're planting seedlings, cone seedlings with a tree dibble, a person can plant 500-600 trees a day, and it's almost nothing. If you're planting seedling stock that's been started up pretty good, then maybe 200-300 trees for a day for a group is a lot of work. So I guess I'd be real curious whether we're planting bare root or cone stock, or whether actually what size trees we're trying to plant. So maybe we could get some information on that.
I'm not sure. I know they've been doing seedlings with that project. So up in the burn scar. So that's with I don't know if you've been seeing that with the Coalition for the Poudre Watershed. A lot of the sun's on private lands, I think. So not with the Forest Service. So we'll have more information, just an idea we've been bouncing around to kind of do, since I know we're all interested in that. So if there's any other questions, I think we'll move on to the budgets. Oh, Angela, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if, it's a bit chicken before the egg, but, Carolyn, if we knew sort of for certain that Rep. Froelich was going to introduce this bill, I wonder if it would be useful to maybe get Dana Coelho from your team in to sort of do a briefing for these folks about urban and community forestry in Colorado, and help them, just talk through and sort of parse out some of the issues that they raised today around, who are the folks doing the planting generally, what are the water use trade-offs, what are the shade benefits, the sort of all the costs and benefits associated with urban and community forestry. Do you think that would be useful? Do you think that's too, do you think we're putting the cart before the horse before we sort of know that this bill is really going to be introduced?
No, I think it's going to be introduced, and I think Dana would be super helpful to answer these questions. And She's been involved, in the small conversations we've had about this, but she can really provide some context here, I think, for the group.
Okay. Yeah. So Dana runs the State Forest Service's urban and community forestry programs. So if you all are interested, we could set aside, I don't know, a half an hour of a subsequent legislative committee meeting. And I guess if we have it a month out, that would be in December, but that's up to you, Chair Shattuck McNally. So just a suggestion.
Well, I think that's a great suggestion. I had one other suggestion for December, just kind of a different perspective, but wonder if we can, she would probably be 15 minutes or less, because I think that's what she presented. But we'll do that after your budget talk, Angela, and we can talk about that. But I think that's a great suggestion, because I think it is good to have those discussions and talk about the trade-offs that Mr. Morgan brought up and that you mentioned as well. So is there any other questions about any of these other topics? We know that once the session starts, it depends on, excuse me, we'll know more, I guess, after this next week about how it's shaping up. So it certainly will be interesting how this will be going forward. Excuse me. So any other questions? Otherwise, we can move on to the budget and talk about this since it just came out. This is a good timely meeting to look at some of the details in that. And I'll just turn it over to Angela. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Just this morning, I sent a link to the governor's budget letter, which includes sort of the full budget proposal summary for next year. I'm just trying to see if I can zoom in on this. Let's see. I'm going to stop and open up the PDF so that you all can see it. And feel free to follow along if you have the PDF open on your own computer. So, I think we sent around a very high-level summary of the more sort of DNR relevant pieces of the budget proposal, but I wanted to walk through the full wildfire package because there are details in there that I think are relevant to all of you, and will just help to paint the picture of what is proposed. And again, just as a reminder, the governor is obligated to present a budget proposal by November 1st each year. This is that, and then the legislature gets the chance to sort of decide what they think should actually move through and what shouldn't, and what makes it into the actual budget and is approved. So I hope that is helpful context. And just for interest's sake, the governor can also submit what's called a supplemental request, I believe by January 1st each year. So if there are additional sort of program funding decisions that he wants to push, that's an opportunity, but it's sort of a last minute opportunity. Like, this is really the first bite at the apple. So in the doc I sent around, page 29 of the PDF is the full wildfire package. It's just over $38 million for wildfire suppression, mitigation, suppression, and recovery. This graph has a bit of a breakdown of how that shakes out. So we have 13.8 million for aerial resources, and I'll just walk through these sort of at a very high level. Under Department of Public Safety, 4.6 million to go to local fire districts, 2 million for public education around wildfire risk and mitigation, 2 million for smart construction and home hardening to reduce risk, 7 million for landscape scale fuels reduction, mitigation and workforce development, 3.2 million for fire investigations and statewide fire data, and 5.6 million for other, which is a bit of a catch-all, but I'll walk through these individual items here. So as I said, the biggest chunk here is aerial resources. Again, this is in the Department of Public Safety's wheelhouse, but my understanding is that this would fund another Firehawk helicopter under a lease-to-own model, and then supply them with staff to actually fully staff those aerial resources, which is, of course, something you have to think about if the state's going to be running a couple helicopters, from here on out. 4.6 million to expand training for local fire districts. So to provide staff and equipment, to provide, expanded training and certification to enhance fire preparedness. So again, this is largely on sort of the suppression and emergency response side of things. Statewide fire risk reduction initiative, 1.6 million. I'm a little less clear on what this is. Again, it's a DPS effort, but it would hire staff dedicated to assisting local governments with developing all hazards community risk reduction plans. So I'm guessing this has something to do with, you know, oh gosh, what's the acronym?
PPPs.
Yeah, thanks. So maybe CWPPs, but I also think it's oh my gosh, what are the hazard mitigation plans that counties?
Community wildfire protection plans?
Yeah, but even more broadly than that,
Yeah, I can't remember what they're called, but we're each required to have
I
that
think it's the hazard
thing that
mitigation
you said.
plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
I don't
So
think
anyway,
we have an acronym for those yet.
yeah, and maybe we can get someone from the State Forest Service to help explain how this is going to interact with CWPPs, because I'm not super clear on that. And then getting into our more firmly side of the world in terms of forest management, 2 million to the State Forest Service for Good Neighbor Authority projects. This would specifically provide funds to increase workforce at the State Forest Service to leverage federal funds, you know, to work on these Good Neighbor Authority projects that are getting underway. You know, I've talked to Director McCombs, and for those who maybe haven't followed this, he did secure almost $2 million from the U.S. Forest Service to hire, I think it's like 10 or 11 State Forest Service staff. Is that right, Carolyn? To really support on cross-boundary projects with our federal partners.
Yeah, it's really exciting for us. It's going to give us a lot of capacity.
It's a little less than the 10 or 11. That was the original proposal, but it was reduced amount, so it's more like, I think, 6 positions, or there are some temporary seasonals as well.
Great, thanks for that, Diana. And so I think, you know, I sort of saw the calculation was by bringing on these extra state resources, we could, I think, take it from an estimated like 5,000 acres of sort of G&A or associated projects completed in the next few years up to 15,000 acres. So that was sort of the calculus as, you know, how can we bring on additional staff capacity to get some work done at larger scales. 1 million that will go to local and state agency sort of planning and project management capacity. And the idea is to inject this into Furworm, into their capacity grants, which some of you hopefully are familiar with. There are basically 2 buckets of Furworm. One is to fund projects themselves, and then one is to support capacity building, which can include equipment purchases, but it can now also fund staff, you know, at the local level who can plan and implement projects. So, and these are all one-time funds, I should say. So this is just an injection of $1 million, which would probably become available, you know, next fall or the year after. $2 million for a public education and outreach campaign that's expanded. So you all might remember, was it HB 22007 last year, the public outreach and education bill? So that provided a few $100,000 to the State Forest Service to work with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control and the U.S. Forest Service to develop an expanded education campaign around Wildfire Awareness Month, which is in May each year, but really to make that more effective, a much bigger deal. This additional $2 million would really help to expand that campaign to directly educate homeowners. And again, I'll let Diana and Carolyn fill in at the end here if they have any more details on how these programs will work. $2 million to incentivize smart construction and home hardening in the wildland urban interface. The direct incentives will likely live in Division of Fire Prevention and Control to basically provide direct cash to folks who are doing home hardening retrofits. But we'll have to see how that needs to be a new program. So there will need to be a bill to basically develop a new program. And then we have 7 million here total that would go to COSWAP in a couple different ways. So we've proposed $5 million annually of severance tax to fund COSWAP. And so that's reliant on oil and gas revenues, right? But it would be an annual source of funding. And then there is additional just 2 million one-time funds that would support the landscape resilience portion of COSWAP. And then finally, 3.2 million for fire investigators and a statewide fire data governance system. Again, this is all at Department of Public Safety. And let's see, just $700,000 for homeowners insurance transparency and accountability program, really to educate homeowners, you know, on their sort of insurance from wildfires and other disasters. And then just rounding it out, the governor's office supplied us with a grant of a few $100,000 to evaluate the impact of COSWAP funded projects, as well as other projects, regardless of what program they're funded through, that are sort of connected to COSWAP funded projects or in the same area. So we're contracting with the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute to basically analyze, you know, how effective are these projects at actually reducing risk for communities. And it's going to take 2 to I think 3 years really to get those results, but we're excited about that. You know, and it's great that the governor's office is supporting it. So before I open it up to questions, Carolyn or Diana, do you have anything to add on those items? Any color to add?
I don't. Do you, Diana?
Sorry, my microphone wasn't turning on. Not a whole lot really. The public education one is underway already. So that will be kind of a campaign that starts next year. So this additional funding for that would just continue and increase that campaign. And I think, as Angela said, a lot of the other ones, there's existing programs for the Colorado State Forest Service that it would just get funneled through. And then most of the other newer programs are going towards either DFPC or yeah, I think that's pretty much it. For at least for the Colorado State Forest Service, all of the funding would be kind of just going into the existing programs we currently have.
Great, thanks. Any questions from folks?
I have some, if I might. And then Mr. Morgan after me, if you don't mind. I'm right off the bat, my question was the local fire districts. And I don't know, how is my recording quality? Because my internet's still eroding out here in my.
It's great.
Okay, cool. The expand training for local fire districts. And does that help with just providing equipment or bringing up technical training? And is that for ones that have paid staff, or these for the ones, we can have a handful that are all completely volunteer? So I'm curious, how does that look? Because when you think about all the fire districts, I think we have 17 here in Larimer County. How does that, do you have any idea how that's going to go out? Is it a grant, or is it just kind of showing up and providing this? And I have to say thank you very much for the support to the Glen Haven Fire Department in my district, which is, you know, right in the Cameron Peak Fire and having all the flash flooding. But I know we're doing a lease to purchase of that firefighting vehicle for them, which is huge since they're all volunteer.
That's a great question. And it's one that we'll need to put to DFPC because I don't know. It seems clear from the description that it would fund, you know, equipment purchases, and then staff, I suppose, to sort of provide training and certification. But I just don't know, you know, yeah, to what extent it applies to volunteer fire protection districts, et cetera. But we can pose those questions to DFPC, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer.
Because I'm just wondering if it's like a truck or if it's helmets and boots, and you know, because I know boots. I learned boots are like $500 to $600 a piece for each firefighter, and I know that's a big expense. So I'm just kind of curious about some of those things. So I don't know, Angela, do you want to handle the questions, and or Mr. Morgan, and then Hillary? We're in the queue.
Well, I just had, I assume our workforce development efforts then would come under the landscape mitigation and related workforce? Or is the governor unaware of what we've been doing here, or where?
No, he is. So they could be in addition to. So And let me see if I can get these funds straight. So in Cutter's bill will sort of stand alone and move through on its own. And I'll have to go back and look at that. That also has has some dollars for COSWAP for the workforce development component of that. The severance tax dollars that are in this proposal could, I think, be used flexibly within COSWAP to fund either the workforce development component or the landscape scale restoration investment that's a piece of COSWAP. So basically like directly funding large scale forest management projects. So Cutter's bill will move through on its own. Most of the budget proposals in the governor's budget that would fund existing programs, they won't necessarily have, like those funds can go into the long bill. And Carolyn, feel free to correct me here, but I don't think that they have to run a separate bill to move these funds unless they have to create a new program.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I was just curious that I think everybody's trying to get to the same place, that we don't duplicate things and we give the taxpayer their money's worth, but we make sure that we get things taken care of so that it doesn't fall through the cracks somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Commissioner Cooper.
Thanks. Just another thought for the whatever the fire DFPC. I'm wondering if there is a growing trend that I'm seeing locally of volunteer fire districts becoming paid fire districts, and I think it's happening in with my fire district because they see the opportunity to fight wildfires and sort of be assigned around the state, and they see that as a bigger opportunity than just sort of waiting for things to happen around here. So it's just a growing concern that I'm hearing from my constituents, and it also has the effect of reducing staff because there was a willingness for many years now, as long as I've been here, for people to volunteer. It was kind of a status and community service and all of that. And now people aren't willing to volunteer if their colleagues are being paid. And we also have fewer and fewer volunteers because we have fewer and fewer workforce because of the housing challenges and other things in our region. So it's compounded by multiple things. It's not just this switching to paid fire districts, but I'm wondering if it's a trend and if there's some consequences to that trend that we should be taking a look at in terms of our local firefighting resources. Maybe it's good. I'm just getting a lot of concerns from my region. So I don't know if you could throw that out or give me a contact and I can ask. And then the other piece is the education, well, the transparency for insurance around insurance companies is absolutely crucial and very important. And I'm glad that that's a focus for the governor. I think also just increased education to the general public, because it's also our responsibility as homeowners to check to see where our homes are valued. And if we're trying to save money on, maybe slightly undervaluing our homes, then, that's on us, and more homes are going to burn. I mean, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I think we know that now. So I would like to see, and education can be cheap and effective. So I'd love for maybe it's a different group to work on sort of a statewide education program. We've seen it in the headlines, but I think it's really important to educate homeowners on their responsibility to just simply call their insurance company to make sure their homes are valued, especially with today's building prices. I mean, most of our homes are valued at yesterday's building prices, and so they're all undervalued. So that part's on us.
We're doing, I'm going to, if you don't mind, Ms. Morgan, I'm going to jump in since I raised my hand. We're doing some local efforts to, with our Office of Emergency Management and our Recovery and Resiliency Project with these resiliency hubs, And we're doing a really big push through Lori Hodges and her team to help educate folks on that. So we've been trying to do that locally. And on a side note, Lori Hodges just got appointed to the FEMA National Board and is the secretary. And hopefully she'll bring some wildfire sense to that board. But just so you know, that's a nice appointment to have some Western perspectives on that board. The other question I have real quick, and then Mr. Morgan, is when you talk about local fire districts, as you know, in Larimer County, we have the local fire district and then the emergency services through the sheriff's department, which kind of is that next step for us that takes over kind of fighting the fire. And we had 52 fires here in Larimer County this year, and 100% of them were put out and kept under 300 acres because of the local fire district and then the emergency services through the fire, through sheriff's office, which is a whole different firefighting and team and stuff. And we're giving them some money. I'm wondering, does they also qualify for this since they're not a district, but they're kind of part of that? I'm just curious about that. And then because we are trying to expand, their office and their training is in a floodplain, so we're having to move them and then also expand their capacity because they're training a lot of folks at the center. So curious about those. I think there are a few of those emergency services kind of firefighting sections in counties. So curious about that.
Thanks for that, Jody. Courtney's obviously capturing all of these, so we'll put together like a chunk of questions for DFPC and send it over to them. And then we can respond to all of you with the answers once we get them.
Cool. Thanks. Mr. Morgan.
I'm learning something here. Hillary, this was kind of for you, for Commissioner Cooper, but it's been my experience in the past dealing with quite a bit with different fire responses that most volunteer fire agencies do pay their people when they're dispatched to a fire. Am I incorrect there? So, I mean, it's not a paid unpaid deal, but the thing about it is that with any fire crew, fires are very hard to duplicate for a training exercise. So the more your crew goes out on fire, the better crew you have. The downside to that is the more your crew goes out on fire, the less coverage you have locally. If say you've got a good crew and then it gets dispatched to a fire and then they're not there and then you get, and so this sharing of resources throughout the state traditionally has been pretty good. I mean, one of the things I was impressed with at the fire there in Boulder last year was how people committed completely, and they committed everything they had at the time because they saw the gravity of the situation, and there wasn't a lot of holding back. But there is a risk to that for the community, and finding that balance is always hard. But I would suggest that the more your crew gets used, the better the crew you're going to have. And so that's just a hard thing to duplicate other than get in the middle of the battle and get after it. So I think, and the funding side of it, generally the people that are on the crews, they go through the training and they put in the effort. If they don't get to go out, you tend to lose participation in your volunteer crew. They need to get out and get some fires and make some money. I hired 2 young men recently that were spent the summer on a fire crew, and they never got a single fire. So rather than fighting fire next summer, they're coming to work for me. So that was your trade-off. But just a couple thoughts.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Morgan. Angela's, we're just looking at time check here because I want to save enough time for the last point and honor everyone's time. Is any other question? I really appreciate you explaining this and kind of going in depth. And I'm sure as we're reading this and going more in depth to what you've sent us with the governor's budget, we can always kind of leave this for future meetings to have more discussions and questions, especially since we've thrown a lot of questions towards Courtney and Carolyn for some of these questions. So I guess we'll leave that on for the agenda. Is there anything else you really want to talk about to kind of highlight with this budget, or do you think we can have a few minutes to discuss our speakers for next meeting? Because I have a feeling we'll have to put answers to these questions on the agenda for next meeting.
Yeah, for sure. No, not much more to say. I would just say, keep this budget proposal in sort of the back of your mind and like in your inbox or print it out or something. because I think it will be useful just to remember that this is here and that some of this funding or most of this funding will likely move through unless there's some like huge shakeup with the budget or something crazy happens in the election next week, which who knows, it could, right? So all bets are off for now, but I just say keep this all in mind, because as the legislative session starts rolling and bills get introduced, I think it'll just help you sort of track and ask the questions that Mr. Morgan posed, about, okay, as new bills are introduced, like what is the value add here given what, is in the governor's budget and will likely be moved through in terms of additional funding for existing programs. I think it'll just help you have more context for, how the legislative session might reshape some programs moving forward. So that's all I'll say. But yeah, happy to move on.
Great. Thank you, Angela, for all your information on that and sending that to us. Mr. Morgan, I see you have your hand raised.
I'll make it real quick. One of the things that I see here is a huge investment in aerial resources, and I understand that aerial resources are relatively low impact on the ground in firefighting, and so they're a very popular way to achieve your efforts. But one of the problems we have here in Colorado, and a lot of other states are starting to recognize this, is that our fires are primarily wind-driven and wind events. And when you get extreme wind events, that grounds all your aerial attack forces. And so I think the state, going forward, a future discussion may have to look going back to some ground resources other than just pumper trucks, because a lot of other states, I was down and traveled extensively down in Florida and stuff, and like on their fire suppression, they have a pretty significant ground force through the state level. California obviously does, Cal Fire does, Washington does, Oregon does. And I think that the investment in aerial is good, but when the wind blows, your planes are on the ground. And then that's when your need is greatest. So somebody at some time is going to have to look at that.
Great, thank you. And I was thinking some of the same thing, because we had that tragic plane crash and death for the Kruger Rock Fire in Estes last year. So something to, or was it this year? It's kind of all blending in all of a sudden. So it's with as much activity as we've had. So good point, Mr. Morgan. So I'm sorry we didn't get to say goodbye to Miss Hillary Cooper. She jumped off very quickly. So hopefully we can still kind of vote on these future topics. But it looks like we'll have future meetings. First off, our next meeting would be like the week before Thanksgiving, or do we want to wait again until December 2nd to give staff a little more time to get some of these questions answered? And then also bring the speaker that Angela mentioned to talk about urban forestry and the trade-offs. And then I had a suggestion. I was at we convened a big kind of climate summit here in Larimer County with academia, nonprofits, industry, municipalities, and we had some speakers from CSU. One was talking about Indigenous voices and kind of learning from our Indigenous folks from kind of how they dealt with some of these issues. And she did a really quick, interesting 10-minute presentation, which kind of was mine, just thought-provoking, and with Councilmember Whiteskunk. I thought maybe he would, I know he's not here today, but I thought about bringing that perspective to our conversations. And then also, I think, Courtney, you were talking, or Angela, you were talking with the other speaker. We had Courtney from CSU, is Stoltz, maybe? I'm trying to think what was her last name. And she was also the other, yeah, so I think she was also the speaker. So I don't know if she might provide some feedback, but first off, what's the thoughts on our next meeting, waiting till December 2nd? Or would you want to go ahead and do that Friday before Thanksgiving, the 18th?
I'm good with what anybody wants.
Jody, I was just going to ask a question.
Sure.
Do we have anything urgent that we need to meet the Friday before Thanksgiving?
No, and I will actually be calling in probably from the I have a family member having major surgery, so I'll be calling in from the hospital that day. I'm going to be working remotely for a few days, so I was just planning to do that from the hospital room. But you're all welcome to. We can do that. So if December works, 2nd, we can all we know we're all getting busier with the holidays coming up. I'm just want to make sure to honor your voices, so we can wait till December 2nd if that's the consensus for the group.
And I don't know if we have enough people to make a motion or if we even need a motion, but I'll move that we hold off till December 2nd.
Courtney, I don't know if we can take a vote, but can we just go ahead and, Angela, do you think just kind of decide without taking a formal vote, just call it a consensus? What do you think,
Yeah,
Angela?
I think we can
That's
make
probably
that
fine.
decision. Yeah, and I also seem to remember if you have quorum at some point in the meeting and someone leaves, it doesn't break quorum. So if you needed to vote on something, you could, but I don't think you need to vote on meeting dates.
Cool. Great. So we'll move. So unless I have a strong opposition, we'll go ahead and move it to December 2nd. And then thank you all for that. And I think also it helps with DNR and staff, as I'm sure they're getting very busy getting ready for the holidays and the legislative session on top of it. So, so topics, obviously kind of circling back to answering some of these questions from the budget. And then Angela's talking about the urban forestry. We'll have some more information on Representative Froelic's bill. And then what do you think about having an Indigenous kind of 10-minute presentation looking at kind of their thoughts towards forest health from an Indigenous historical perspective? What do you think? From Dr. Doreen Martinez from CSU, who presented with Angela's colleague, Courtney.
I think that would be great, Jody. And I wonder if, and this is just my perspective, maybe we could see if Selwyn White Skunk wants to tag team on that and present anything from his perspective.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping. That was my next thing, is maybe contacting him. I don't know if maybe Courtney could, or if you want me to, because I don't know how that works with, I probably can't call him and talk about at the beginning.
We're happy to do it.
Okay, because the agenda thing, but I was wondering if he would like to bring that perspective. So, because I would love to have his voice with that. So what do you think about that? Anybody against those topics?
I'm fine with it.
Great. You guys are just make this so pleasant and so easy. I love our consensus building. So thank you all for your time today. And we're at time. And unless there's any other burning topics other than to wish you all a wonderful Thanksgiving season, and hope that you get to spend time with those family and friends and take some time for yourselves. So
Thank you.
great.
Thanks, everybody, for all your help.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second? Great. All those in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Bye.
Okay, have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.
Thanks,
Happy
everyone.
holidays. Thanks.
Happy holidays.